Hey guys, uh, I wasn't gonna do. I'm not gonna do anything right now on spiritual gifts. I've done prophecy part one, intro, prophecy part one, prophecy part two. I'm still waiting on a little feedback from you guys, but I think it's a worthwhile deal to do. But I just interesting today. So I have a friend that I have not talked to probably since Christina and Valerie were adopted. I think last time I talked to him, he was about to leave the cattle ranch and start a cowboy church, and we were about to adopt children. And I've sent him a few messages on Messenger. I couldn't really tell if he was getting them, but I just felt like today, I can actually push call and we can connect. And so I did, and we just talked probably for 2 hours. And I'm just going to tell you, it was amazing. And where he's come and where I've come in the last 16, 17 years, both of us going through some good and bad times. We connected, but it was interesting. Right at the end of the call, he said, "I want to tell you something." He said, "A few days ago, I saw your name and I saw the little phone dial, and the thought came to me is I can push dial," but he didn't. But then when I called today, but I think the Lord's putting this together, and I'm going to go to South Mississippi. We're going to hang out. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's I believe it's like he said, we both now have like the whatever. It's up to us what we're going to do with it. But it was interesting. He came into all the gifts of the Spirit and all that kind of stuff since we met. He had some hard times, just like I've had some hard times. He's had his hard dealings with religion, burnout, wanting to quit. I don't know what his stories are. He doesn't know mine. I don't think we want to tell our sad stories, but it's interesting because, when we first, I think the word he used was piss and vinegar. When we were first talking about the Lord, we thought we knew everything, back in 1995 or 4 or 6, 7, something like that. But, God humbled us, life humbled us, our mistakes humbled us, and we're just trying to be faithful at this point. But it was interesting because I was listening mostly at the beginning. I did tell a story at the end, but he was telling about one of our customers that died. And at the funeral, or at that point, he felt like the Lord said, raise him from the dead. And he didn't pray for him. And some weeks later, another guy that was at the funeral, he shared that with him, and he heard the Lord say the same thing, and they didn't do it. And that reminded me of my story about the one time that I believe somebody was raised from the dead. And if you want to hear this, continue. If you don't, I would click off now, because I'm going to tell my story about the one person that I thought was raised from the dead, which is something Jesus did multiple times, Peter did, Paul did, and probably all the other apostles probably raised some people dead, because Jesus said, "Go and raise the dead." That's part of our mission. So anyway, I am talking with Jeff. I kind of pulled over pretty close to where it happened, and so we kind of ended the conversation with that and his story, and then like a commitment that we're going to try to connect. But so I'm going to tell this little story. It'll probably take 10 minutes, but so my business is Stockman Supply. The man I bought my land from, his name was Mickey. And Mickey was the father of one of my best friends named Mike Edwards, who's on this page. And Mike and I had an encounter with the Lord like 2 or 3 weeks after I did. And Mike's walking with the Lord today. It's all good. But Mickey and I got close because Mike and I kind of had a little split, all right? And I'm not saying it's my fault or Mike's fault. It's probably both. Both more than neither. But we had a little split over some business dealings. And so, I don't know, Mickey and Mike had a little split. So Mickey comes and gives me 5 pounds of brim fillets. Now, I'm not talking about tilapia. I'm talking about bluegill. 5 pounds. I mean, like a 2.5 gallon sack of brim fillets. And we started fishing, and we fished for years. I do remember Ron challenging me because Mickey kind of watched through several of our adoptions. He took kids fishing. He loved my kids, and he knew I was a believer. Actually, Mickey asked me to preach his uncle's funeral. Now, that's interesting because his uncle was basically his dad. His name was Dude. He was an amazing man. And Mickey said, look, you're about the only Christian we know. And we can get this preacher, but we don't know this preacher. But we know you, and you knew Dude. Would you preach the funeral? And God gave me a great word. He did. And the family was blessed, and that's all we were trying to do. Anyway, so Mickey and I got close. We got really close. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know how many best friends you can have, but Ian, like, if all your best friends are in here, you know, it's all scrunched in there. And Mickey was a good friend. I remember Ron challenging me. He said, have you ever shared the gospel with Mickey? And I was like, no. I was like, because, I mean, if Mickey wants to know, he'll ask. I mean, he sees my life. You know, he knows all the stuff. And he said, yeah, but you need to share the gospel with him directly, because if he dies, you're going to wish you had done that. You're going to regret that. And so, anyway, I had an opportunity. I remember I gave him my book, which most of y'all have, and I was pretty nervous about it. But Mickey said, you know, a few years ago I wouldn't have been interested in this, but I'm interested now. And so I think he read it. And also Robert's dad, Ed Buckner, started really evangelizing those little things that I send from Ed Buckner. He was sending to Mickey. About 6 months before Mickey died, he was walking with the Lord. He was a believer, and he was going to church with his family and all that kind of stuff. And it's just cool because when you love somebody, you don't want to push them, but at the same time, you don't want them to go to hell, you know. So it was kind of, but anyway, back to the story. So anyway, me and Mickey and Jimmy Anderson had gone to Grenada Lake, and we got on the fish, and we had caught at least 250 white bass, weighing between 1 and 3 pounds, probably averaging 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. We had filled up the biggest cooler we had to the point that there was no room. Now, Mickey's a voluminist. In other words, he wants to catch 1,000, but if you can't keep him, he's done. And so I told Jimmy and Mickey, I was like, there is no more room. Quit catching fish and throwing them on the floor, because there's no place to put them. And there is no more cooler. There's no more ice. And so Mickey and Jimmy were like, well, fine, we'll just go home. Of course, it was late in the afternoon, but we just decided to go home. So we went to the landing, got in the truck, and we're driving. It's about 1 hour and 15 minutes from the lake to my house. And we're buzzing down the road, and Mickey, this is a confession, but my lights were out on my trailer. And I knew that, and Mickey knew that. It was getting kind of dusky. And Mickey was like, we got to get these lights. We got to fix these lights. You know, I said, I know. And about that time, there was an explosion. And we didn't know what it was. And we were about 2 miles from the interstate that goes to my house. But it hit us so hard, I could not control the steering wheel. All right. And so I went into the median, which is about 20 yards wide. It's got a little concrete dip. And I'm skidding sideways, like in a 4Runner. We're pulling a boat, and the boat is actually in the car. I mean, the boat is right here. All right. And we're skidding, and I'm going to try to describe it because I want it to be dramatic for dramatic effect. But we're skidding, so, and it gets really quiet. And it gets really quiet. So I had mud grips on there, and I was digging the mud sideways, and then we would go up in the air. I remember the look on Mickey's face. He was holding, I don't know if he was holding my hand or the steering wheel, or not the steering wheel, but the thing. And I remember him looking at me, and I could interpret what he was saying. He was saying was like, this is very serious. And it was very serious. And we didn't know if we were going to live or die. And we didn't know what was going on. And so we, from the point of impact, we had skidded about 100 yards. And of course, a 4Runner is kind of like a Jeep. I mean, it can flip on you. And so the fear was we would go and then we'd hit and we would just spin and flip. But then we turned sideways, and we did, the boat spun out of the 4Runner, and it went about another 60 yards. And the trailer for the boat had broken 3 pieces. Didn't know that. So I'm thinking as we're going backwards, we're going back into the other lane of the interstate, and cars are coming. And I'm thinking we're gonna get killed here, you know. And we got right to the edge, and the trailer that was broken into like 3 pieces, the short piece jackknifed right under the tires, and it stopped right on the edge of the highway. So I remember Mickey saying, "Did we have a blowout?" Because we didn't know what happened. We didn't know somebody maybe hit us. We didn't know anything. We just know we were driving along doing fine. Then all of a sudden, an explosion. And 10 seconds later, here we are. So I call Shannon. She's freaking out. She's thinking, "Oh, I'm telling her we're okay. We're okay. We had a bad wreck, but I mean, nobody's hurt." So I'm talking to Shannon, and while I'm talking to Shannon, this black lady, and I got to use this for effect because it won't make any sense otherwise. But some black Starkville lady comes walking up, and she's screaming, "There's a car over here. There's a car over here." Well, about 70 yards up the road from where we got hit, there's a car. So I walk to the car. The car's upside down. It's white. It's a Mercedes. It's upside down. There are flames coming out of the motor, but everything else is dead quiet. And I thought to myself, this ain't good. This is bad. There's somebody dead in there. And if you can imagine now, my adrenaline is pumping. I mean, whatever adrenaline pump is, I'm pumping. And I'm just thinking, this ain't good. So I go and open the driver's side door upside down. I look and I see a body laid on the other side. The foot is stuck in the steering wheel. All right. And I think 2 things. I think that's not good. And B, is this a European car? Because the steering wheel's on the wrong side. But then I said, oh, it's upside down, which puts the steering wheel on the opposite side. So I walked around. The black lady that told me about the car, she comes, "Oh, Lord, oh, Lord." She's being very dramatic. And then this huge black guy comes walking up. And I say huge because I'm not small at this time. I'm walking around about 225. I got a lot of muscle. I weigh like 185 right now. I mean, I'm frail and old, but at that time, you know, this guy was way bigger than me. I'm saying he's pushing 270 to 300, but he ain't fat. It ain't Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I mean, he's a big old guy, and he walks up, and we open the door, and sure enough, there's the foot hanging in the steering wheel, and there's the body with glass and everything, whatever. And so he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Pull her out, turn her over, and let, you know." So we pulled her out. I actually unhooked her foot. So he pulled her out. We flipped her over. And her hair, there was blood all over her head. And so her hair was kind of caked, like stuck to her face, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And her eyes were like open about this far. But her hair was like caked. And so we flipped her over, and the black lady, no offense, I'm just trying to describe, if you're black, you know, the black lady says, "Oh, Lord, she dead. She dead. Oh, Lord, she dead." So she goes on the dead rant for about 5 minutes or several minutes. And I'm thinking, I agree with her. So my dad was a veterinarian, and I had to euthanize pets. It's PG-13, but I've probably killed thousands of animals, either by euthanasia or hunting or whatever. I kind of know what dead looks like. I hadn't seen very many dead people, but this looks dead to me. I mean, and I agree with her, but she's screaming, "Oh, Lord, she dead, she dead." And so I didn't know what to do. And of course, my adrenaline's pumping. We haven't been praying. We didn't pray from Grenada to Starkville. We're 2 miles from home. But the Lord said to me, if you ever want to raise the dead, now here's your chance. Now, that took me back, like in an instant, to when I first started being interested in spiritual gifts. I thought it'd be really cool to raise the dead, because Jesus raised the dead. He said, go raise the dead. I thought, man, that'd be really cool. And I met a guy, and he was moving in spiritual gifts. And I said, have you ever raised the dead? He said, yes, once. And he told me the story about his son falling off a bridge. He was a surveyor, and he fell backwards off the bridge and hit his head on the pavement, like an overpass. And he did all the shaking, and he stopped, and he ran down there, and he said, Lord, I want you to, and he prayed for him, and he said, open his eyes. He said, Daddy, help me up. And so he just had like a little bump on his head. And he said, the problem with raising the dead is you got to first have a dead person. I remembered all of that in like one moment. But I said, I'm going to pray for her. So I told the big black guy, I don't know his name, I said, step back, I'm going to pray for her. When I put my left hand on her, it was like I grabbed a hold of an electric current. It was like, and this is only the I don't know if it was the first or only twice in my life have I ever felt what I felt that moment. And I don't know, it lasted a minute or two, and I felt like, I just felt like as it started to wind down, I felt like she was going to be okay. And when it just started to wind down, I just said, Lord, let life come back in her. That was my prayer. Let life come back in her. And so anyway, about the time it started to wind down, my brother said, hey, the car's still on fire. And it was, because there was still fire coming out of the motor. And I said, you're right, scoop her up, take her up to the highway. So he scooped her up and went to the road, and I was down a hill. And at that time, people were starting to show up, and they were screaming, there's a baby in the car, there's a baby in the car. So I'm looking around the car for a baby, any signs of anybody else besides this girl in the car. I didn't find anything, but it might have took 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something like that. So I walk up, and the guy is still standing like on the edge of the road, looking straight. All right, looking, let me see. I mean, he's just like this way. I'm coming from like way over here. I walk up, and he looks at me, he turns his head, and he said, she breathing? And I was like, put her down, let me pray for her. So I prayed for brain damage, and all of a sudden her eyes opened. And she looked at me like, who are you, and why are you on top of me? And had to kind of wrestle her for a little while till the EMTs got there, and they took her to the hospital. I never saw that guy again. If I've ever seen an angel, that was probably him, because I looked around, I was like, where's this guy? And he wasn't around. So it took a couple of days before I could find out anything. I called the hospital a few times, and finally somebody would talk to me, not legally, but they just basically said, look, this was about 10 p.m. They released her at 11 p.m. with scratches. Now, again, I told you the hair was caked to her face. Her eyes were open. They ain't no scratches. I mean, that's blood, that's cuts, that's stitches, that's all that kind of stuff. But they let her go home with scratches, and I don't know what day it was. Sunday, I guess, Saturday. I guess, I don't know, this is probably Thursday. So Saturday she called. All I understood was she was crying. I tried to ask her about a white light. I tried to, tried to tell her what happened, but all she did was cry. I mean, she just boo-hooed. I couldn't understand anything. And so I was struggling a little bit about, was she dead? Was she not dead? I didn't really, I didn't have like a medical documentation. So I was struggling a little bit. And Sunday morning, my habit was to pray an hour or so before church, and then I would go kind of to the leaders' time and pray with them, and then we'd do our service. And so I was praying, and I was just flipping through the scriptures like I do, and I saw a verse that said, Jesus went to pray for somebody who had died. Tabitha, I don't know, it wasn't Tabitha. It was somebody who, Dorcas maybe? Yeah. Anyway, he said, don't worry, she's only sleeping. And they laughed. they mocked and they kind of jeered him. And when I read that, I felt in my spirit, the Lord says, don't mock me. And so I said, yes, sir, because I felt it strong enough. I was like, okay, I mean, I'm doubting, but if you say she was dead and you raised her from the dead, I'm going to go with that. So I accepted that, and then I went to the little leaders meeting, and there was one guy that was a part of our church that at that time that was very gifted in the prophetic. I mean, like scary gifted at times. And anyway, I had a few encounters with him, when he was on point. And this was a Sunday. I walked in there. He got in my face like he wanted to fight. And he said, do not mock God. And he chewed me out for about 5 minutes. But I knew he didn't know what he was saying. I knew what he was saying. And so I said, I won't. So I'm not going to. I believe she was dead. I believe God raised her from the dead. And I don't know if she's walking with the Lord today. I don't know any of that kind of stuff. But that's my story. And hope it blesses you. And talk to you soon. See you.